trade deadline in baseball is right around the corner. Steve Gardner kind enough to join us for a couple moments from USA Today. We've got 4 or 5 days away between the trade deadline and baseball. Steve, how you been, pal?
Good, Rich. It's a busy time, that's for sure.
It is. It is a busy time. All right, let's get into it. Listen, we know the two biggest blows over the weekend, Strasburg, but it looks like he's going to make his next scheduled start later in the week, Thursday, I believe, tomorrow. The Dodgers losing Clayton Kershaw. He's going to be on the shelf for 4 to 6 weeks. Now, the name that comes out right away, you've got a couple, right? You've got Verlander, you've got Darvish, you've got Sonny Gray. I'm just wondering, out of those three, first of all, who gets moved and where do they get moved?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, Rich. I think Sonny Gray for sure will be moved. He's the most likely of the trio to be moved. And I think the Dodgers are going to be in on one of them. I think Darvish is probably second most likely, although the Rangers have, still fancy themselves as playoff contenders. And Justin Verlander, I don't know. I think the big hurdle for him is he's still got so much of his contract left on the books, and that anybody that acquires him will have to at least pay some of that. And I don't know how much the Tigers will pay, but the Dodgers don't want to add any more payroll because they're already up against the luxury tax. So it seems to me that if anybody, it seems like Sonny Gray is the leading candidate to go somewhere, and the Dodgers with Kershaw and his situation up in the air, I think have to be the likely source to be the most active.
Darvish, to me, I look at him and I was never a huge fan. I was never really blown away, and I also look at the contract as well and the money that you potentially have to take on. And I know that the Dodgers have been linked to him. I know, I've read a couple of reports that even the Yankees. I don't know why, but I think that was just kind of fodder, if you will. Darvish and Verlander. Out of those two, who would actually be the better acquisition at this point?
I would think it's Darvish. I mean, younger, and he's not going to cost as much because he's going to be a free agent at the end of the season. And so, therefore, you can't really, if you're Texas, expect a whole lot back for him because who knows where he's going to sign after the season's over. So I think he's the most or the more attractive, and plus, he seems to be healthy. He has better numbers this season than Justin Verlander. So yeah, I think he's probably the one that would be more attractive for a team, especially with the financial commitment you wouldn't have to make to him that you would with Verlander.
Yeah, and that's true. You brought up a good point because you mentioned he's going to be a free agent. I didn't know what type of money he would potentially want to command. You're really essentially looking at a rental then if a team doesn't want to re-sign him. And we see that, right? Because a lot of the contenders out there, it's like with the Yankees. I'm reading that the Yankees could have this deal done by Friday, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, what are they giving up? That's the first thing. And what Sonny Gray are you going to get? Because I think all of a sudden this kid's a hot commodity because of his last several starts, even though he lost the other night. And if you're looking at his last 4, 5, 6, you say, okay, he's been a pretty solid pitcher. But again, this is also a guy that was 5-11 last year after a 14-7 campaign. Now, I don't know how much value you put in run support and all that other stuff with Oakland, but I'm just wondering, you're talking about teams that are really going for it. Is he a starting pitcher that a team believes, okay, this is our missing piece?
I think he could be, though. That's the thing. I mean, in 2014 and 15, he was one of the better pitchers in the American League. And last year, injury issues got to him, and the ERA just took off. I think this year, this is an opportunity for Oakland, and here's why I think they'll definitely move him is, they had an opportunity. They had some suitors at the end of 2015, and they didn't trade him and almost got burned when his trade value just plummeted last year. I think now they've got an opportunity to deal him, and there's that incentive. So I think that's part of what the Yankees are looking at. He certainly can give you, a guy who has experience, and, what are you getting from, will Luis Severino be able to pitch deep into September and October. You kind of know that Sonny Gray has that durability when he's healthy. So I think that's part of it. And then maybe, Yonder Alonso was part of at least some of the rumors that I saw. And if the Yankees can work a package deal and get both of those guys, then I think you've got something that's a definite upgrade in two places rather than just one.
The question is, what would they, they have all these coveted prospects. That's the thing. It's like, what is it going to take? I mean, I don't know. I mean, you've got, Hicks is performing well right now. Ellsbury is virtually impossible to trade. You've got Fowler in the system. I don't know. I mean, who would be expendable? If you're the Yankees, who would be expendable right now?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, obviously, you're not going to, if you're Oakland, take somebody that's on the major league roster and is under a contract. Not a Chase Headley or anybody like that. So you'd have to go deeper into the system. I think you'd have to give up, a Tyler Wade, who we saw a little bit. You'd have to give up somebody like a Dustin Fowler, even though he's out for the year. That doesn't matter to Oakland. That would be somebody possibly. Maybe a Chance Adams, one of those guys. I don't know that if you're the Yankees, you have to give up a Gleyber Torres or a Clint Frazier. I think those guys are pretty much untouchable because of the rebuilding process that they're going through, and those guys are the centerpieces of it. But if you can have, a couple of guys that are pretty highly ranked prospects, maybe a couple of top 10 prospects, I think that might be able to get the deal done.
Is there any way? Can you see? And this is totally coming out of left field. The Yankees make a run for Stanton.
I don't see that happening just because I don't think the Marlins know exactly what they want to do, and everything out of Miami says we're not trading him. He's our franchise player, and don't bother. So I think those are pretty far-fetched. And if you're talking a percentage, maybe 2%, and that's is the chance of that.
I guess my point is. And the reason I bring that up is really kind of to piggyback what you just said with the Marlins. Like, why would you? We know what the owner does. We know they always sell off. We know the issues with the stadium. We know the issues with the team. Why would you want to give up, arguably him or Yelich, your two best rising stars? Like, it just seems as a franchise, you've got nothing to really hang your hat on. Why would you want to move those guys?
Right, exactly. I mean, you need to have at least somebody for people to go see, even after you sell the team. Or else, if you start selling beforehand, why would anybody want to buy a team that's going to be, obviously, a team that's going to finish in close to last place at least for the next 3 or 4 years? That's a bad investment right there. And you're already going to be paying, if you're buying the Marlins, an awful lot of money. You'd like to see at least some marketable players there.
Absolutely. Again, a couple minutes with USA Today. Steve Gardner does a great job covering baseball, joins us every week throughout the season. I brought this up during the opening monologue. We'll get to the Phillies in a moment, but the Mets. There's so many reports out there that the Mets are really looking to move players, and we've talked about this, right? I mean, there's whether it's going to be Granderson, he's not going to be back, whether it's going to be Reed, whether it's going to be Bruce, the list goes on and on and on. Follow me for a minute. If you're the Mets and you can find a way to get this to maybe 5 games back at the wild card spot and just inch a little bit towards the Colorado, would you best be served to not trade Bruce, but everyone else you can get rid of, but keep Jay Bruce?
It really depends on what the interest level is and what you can get back. I don't think they're going to be able to get a whole lot back for Jay Bruce. Remember J.D. Martinez, one of the best hitters in baseball, I think, and an outfielder, plays right field. So same kind of player as Jay Bruce, a little bit better average, but still, a lot of power, plays right field. You saw what the Diamondbacks had to give up to the Tigers for J.D. Martinez. It wasn't very much. It was 3 very low-level prospects. I think it's because the contenders, nobody needs a right fielder. Nobody needs that kind of player, and that's why the market wasn't great for J.D. Martinez, and that's why I don't think it would be very solid for the New York Mets and Jay Bruce. So I think Jay Bruce is going to stick around and finish out the season with the Mets. If they can trade anybody, Addison Reed has to be at the top of the list. I think he's the guy that any number of contenders would like to get and could use. As for the other pieces, I find it really hard to see anybody wanting to make any kind of a deal for Bruce or Granderson or Asdrubal Cabrera or anybody. It just doesn't seem like the demand is out there for those guys.
The only team I can think that would maybe make sense, and maybe you use them as a DH, I was thinking Kansas City. I was thinking. I mean,
possibly.
No, I mean, I'm just trying to just thinking right off the bat. I mean. That's
the thing is, though, with Kansas City is that their power is Moustakas and Eric Hosmer.
Yeah, Perez.
Both of those guys are left-handed hitters.
You're right.
And so you throw another one in there. I think it could. Kansas City would probably be able to use. Would have been able to use J.D. Martinez more, but then again, that when that deal was made, the Royals hadn't gone on their 7-game win streak yet. So that's what makes this thing really interesting is that teams, there's so many teams that are in limbo right now, and if somebody can pull off a win streak like the Royals have, then all of a sudden you could go from sellers to buyers in just a blink of an eye, really.
Oh, yeah, because we had them left for dead about a month ago. I mean,
yep.
I did, and they've just, I don't know if it's more of the fact that they're finally starting to put it together. Maybe it's the teams that they've been beaten. Cleveland again. Cleveland has won 5 in a row, 6 out of 10, but the Royals have won 7 straight. So they're right there to make that run. 2 more before I let you get out of here. We talked a little bit about the Central, the NL Central, and what's going on with the Cubs, and all of a sudden, again, 8 out of their last 10. Milwaukee's starting to falter a little bit. Do you think the Cubs will find a way to get it in gear and overtake Milwaukee? Because I believe more in the Cubs because of last year than I do in Milwaukee.
Yeah, I do. They've had some slight injury issues. Jason Hayward was out for a while, and I think that the Cubs getting Kyle Schwarber back and hitting a little bit better than he was beforehand. I think they're a team it's kind of like a sleeping giant, that that they have the talent. We saw how much talent they had last season, and yet they couldn't put it together until right after the All-Star break. They came out of the break like gangbusters. I think that's the Cubs team. They made the trade for Jose Quintana. That helps out the starting rotation. So, yeah, this is a much better team than it was earlier in the season. And I think the Cubs, if they need to go and get another piece, a bullpen piece or something like that, they can. Whereas the Brewers have I think, superseded any expectations for them already this season. And it's a fine line between do you cash in some of the chips, all the prospects that you've gotten in previous deals to get to this point? Do you cash them in now, or do you let those young players continue to mature and give you potentially an even better roster down the road? I think Milwaukee's window is probably more next season and beyond rather than this one. So they made a small bullpen acquisition in Anthony Swarzak from the White Sox yesterday. I think that's the kind of move that they'll make, whereas the Cubs were able to go out and get Jose Quintana. That's where I think the difference is going to be, and ultimately it'll pay off, and the Cubs will pull away in the Central.
Last one before I let you get out of here. Pat Neshek, we had Phillies assistant GM Scott Profrock on last week, and when the GM or the assistant GM starts talking about how well players have pitched and they're thinking about or they're going to be active, I mentioned to him Joseph and Franco and Neshek and Kendrick as well. Who would be the front runners, and do you think it's a foregone conclusion that Neshek gets moved?
I would think so. I mean, he's 36 years old. He's not going to be certainly part of the Phillies' plans when their young players start to reach the major leagues. So, yeah, I think he definitely will be dealt. Where? Gosh, it's anybody's guess.
Washington, I mean, the Dodgers,
the Nationals. Yeah, I was going to say the Nationals could certainly use a little bit more bullpen help. They didn't get the lockdown closer that I think a lot of people were looking for. But then that was part of Tampa Bay playing well, and Alex Colomé maybe coming off the market, and Kelvin Herrera with the Royals coming off the market. It just wasn't there, and so yeah, I think the Nationals, trying to make the moves to bolster the bullpen as a whole, could make a trade with the Phillies for Neshek. But, yeah, there's so many teams out there. The Royals even got a couple of relievers in their deal with the Padres, and could possibly still be in the market for another reliever. So that's one of the easiest commodities to trade at the deadline because there's so many of them. But I think the Phillies certainly have more incentive than most any team to go ahead and move Neshek rather than keep him on the squad after the trade deadline.
All right, he's pitched well coming out of the pen this year, all-star career year as well, so there's value there. All right, my friend, trade deadline right around the corner. Enjoy it. Don't work too hard. We will talk next week. Always appreciate the insight.